My parents sold our house when I was 18, leaving me homeless so they could travel. After 5 years, my mother showed up in tears because my father had cheated on her. I laughed in her face and closed the door. I lost my home when I was 23, and I was cut off by my parents when I was 18, which was 5 years ago. From childhood, I had a very strained relationship with my parents. I grew up knowing that I was not a likable person. I tried to make them love me and win their affection, but when I realized it was futile, I stopped trying and started minding my own business. I think this change began in junior high or high school. By the time I was in high school, I only spoke to my parents when I needed to, otherwise I didn't bother them. It wasn't that I didn't want to have a relationship with them, but they were so obvious about not wanting to have a relationship with me that I even felt it was a bad thing to bother them when I needed help, even though I knew I couldn't rely on anyone but them. My father was a pediatrician and my mother used to teach science at a secondary school, so they were both very good with children. It was ironic that they were good with other people's children but not so good with their own. Anyway, by the time I got to high school, I had decided not to bother trying to win them over. We led very different lives. I hardly saw them at all. My father came home late, and even when my mother and I got home at about the same time, we didn't talk, we didn't even communicate, we just went to our own rooms. I'm telling you the truth, it was like living in a house with strangers. To be honest, there was very little communication between us, and that was about it. I also knew that after going to university I would have to fend for myself because on my 18th birthday, they made it clear to me that they had always supported me because the law required them to do so, but now that I was no longer a minor, I had to start fending for myself. They said it as if they were encouraging me to be independent, but I knew what they really meant was that they hoped I would no longer rely on them, and that they didn't care if I was independent. At that time, I hadn't applied to any universities yet, because I decided to take a year off to accumulate some capital. I knew I needed money to survive, and until I had some, I didn't even dare to hope for university. So after I turned 18, I started looking for a job, and soon I got one at a local supermarket. The pay wasn't great, but at least I was earning my own money. Unfortunately, my happy time didn't last long, because just a few weeks after I started working, I had a new worry. Not long after I started the job, my parents told me they were selling the house and I needed to start looking for a new place. I don't know what happened that day when I asked them why they were selling the house. They told me they were planning to quit their jobs and travel the country with the money from the sale. They told me that obviously they had been saving for something like this their whole lives, and now that I had a job and was old enough to live on my own, they had no more responsibilities to worry about, so they were doing what they had planned and were giving me advance notice so that I could arrange my life accordingly. My life, which puts me in a very difficult situation because I have just started working and don't have enough money to rent an apartment, even with a roommate to share the rent, and I have just started saving money at the current rate. Even if I sleep on the street, I won't have enough money to go to college by next year, and my parents dropped a bomb on me, saying that if I don't find my own place to live, I will be homeless. I tried to negotiate with them, asking them not to sell the house, or at least to postpone the sale for a few months, so that I would have enough time to prepare for moving out. But they were very stubborn and didn't care about my feelings at all. They told me that they had already waited long enough and would not postpone any more plans. What I would do now was my problem, not theirs. My mother told me, "You are an adult now, and we don't need to take care of you anymore. As for the house, it is our property and we can do whatever we want with it. Where you live is no longer our concern." Those were her exact words, and I still remember them vividly, because the discussion was simply so heartbreaking and frustrating. After that discussion, I had the first major argument with my parents in my life, and after that I never saw them again or heard from them, which was not surprising because I knew that once I had left, they would never try to contact me again. I told them that they were horrible people and that I hoped only horrible things would happen to them, because they totally deserved it. I cursed them, not even caring that they were my parents and much older than me. I didn't care because they had treated me so badly without regard for my feelings. The problem is that although I left home in a rage, I later realized that I actually had nowhere else to go. I didn't have any family members who were willing to take me in, because my parents didn't keep in touch with their family, and both of my parents lived away from their respective families because they never participated in most family activities and usually didn't even go home for the holidays. I also didn't have a strong relationship with my family, and I hardly knew anyone, so it would have been unwise to count on them taking me in, and I couldn't get in touch with them because we lived in different states. I did have a few friends from school, but they had all gone off to college by the time I left home, and I didn't want to bother them or their parents, as it would have been awkward, so I decided to take a chance and call one of my colleagues, who is now my wife. It's crazy how things worked out, but I'm glad I decided to reach out to her. I was working at the supermarket that day, and she was in charge of the cosmetics department, and we had been flirting since I joined. In a very short time, we became good friends and got to know each other very well. I knew that she and her parents also had a lot of problems, so I knew that she would understand what I was going through. She was 2 years older than me and, like me, had not been able to go to university because her father was an addict and her mother seemed to care about no one but herself. When she was 18, her father left home and moved in with his brother, and her mother told her that she could no longer support her. That's her story. From the age of 18, she started working so that she could go to beauty school and become a professional makeup artist. So when I called to tell her about everything I'd been through, she told me to come over right away and said I could stay with her. I am very grateful for the help she gave me that day, because it was cold and I had no one to help me. Even though her apartment was small and she was struggling to make ends meet on her own, she still chose to help me, which says a lot about the kind of person she is. Anyway, she let me stay with her, and I didn't pay rent for the first few months because I was still saving money. I did take care of the groceries and other bills, and after I had saved enough money, I started to pay the rent as well. Before I knew it, we went from being friends to being inseparable. At first, my plan was to work at the supermarket for a year and a half or so, but after cutting ties with my parents and finding myself without a place to live, I started working even harder. I applied for the position of floor supervisor and, fortunately for me, got the job because I have always been one of the most sincere and dedicated employees here. Over the past year, I have been paid a decent wage, and my wife is now attending beauty school and is finally able to work part-time at the store. Our lives have been going well until last week, when my mother suddenly appeared. I don't know how she found me, because I haven't had contact with her for 5 years. When I opened the door, she gave me a big hug as soon as she saw me. Before I could react, I made the mistake of not. When I regained my composure, I decided to ask her why she was here. She had already dropped off her luggage at the apartment door. When I asked her this question, she stopped, looked at me very sadly, and then told me that she had come back because my father had decided to leave her. She told me about her and my father's experiences over the past few years. I'll try to make a long story short. They spent the first year and a half traveling all over the country, and then decided to get a job in California. But a month ago, my father told my mother that he was dating a waitress who worked at a restaurant near his office, and that he was leaving her to be with the waitress. My mother thought my father had gone crazy. After some arguing, she decided to choose dignity and self-respect and returned home. But now she needed a place to live, because she needed to save money for a divorce and she didn't have much time before retirement. So she didn't want to waste money looking for a place to live. So she decided to live with me without even asking if I agreed. Now life has returned to square one, and I decided to repeat what she had once said to me. I'm an adult now. They're not responsible for me anymore. This is their house, they can sell it and do whatever they want with it. They don't need my consent, I have to take care of myself. I know that this is because she needs my help. I told her that she is no longer my family, so she must take care of herself. This is my house, and I can do whatever I want with it. I repeated these words with a big smile on my face, and then I closed the door with a smile. This was probably the most satisfying thing in my life, but my wife thought I had gone a bit too far and felt that I should give her another chance. She didn't argue with me, but after witnessing what happened the other day, she felt that I had been a little too harsh on her, and that I should have at least considered her feelings before refusing her. Her parents are dead, I think that's what started it all, but in any case, Ada, I'm grateful that you refused my mother when she came back 5 years later and asked to live with me. Update. I talked to my wife about what she said, and we didn't argue about what happened, but she was a little disappointed. I could feel that she wasn't happy with what I did, but she knew that it was a problem between my mother and me, and I could choose to deal with it in any way I wanted, so it wasn't her place to comment. So she kept trying to restrain herself, but it put a lot of pressure on our relationship. So yesterday, after making a decision and reading some comments, I decided to talk to her. I told her anything about my childhood and explained to her how my parents have always been mean to me, like I was a pariah in my own home. I even got used to it. I always tried to make myself invisible to them, but even that wasn't enough to satisfy them. They had to make my life even more difficult, which is why I don't feel guilty at all when I turn my back when my mother needs my help. For the past 5 years, they haven't even bothered to ask after me. Now she's just here, and she needs me to rescue her. I explain my situation to her, even though she knows most of what's going on. Then she explained to me my reaction at the time, as I had guessed, and she told me that she had just been having a bad time lately because both her parents had died in the past few years, her father from drug addiction and her mother from a heart attack, so she was a bit sensitive about it, and she had misunderstood my intentions, but now everything was fine between us and I was glad we had talked. Meanwhile, my mother had been a nightmare. I couldn't understand it, but she thought harassing me via social media would make me more willing to open the door to her. She had a simple solution, which was to apologize to me and hope for the best. But being a narcissist, she decided to do everything wrong and see what happened. She started posting about how her son and husband treated her and how she regretted spending so much time on us during this stage of her life, and she accused me of being just like my father, abandoning her when she needed me most without even mentioning what she did to me, if not worse. She created a fake profile and tagged me, my wife, and all our friends and family in her posts. I don't know how she knew so much about my life, like who I'm married to and where I live, which is a bit creepy now because I don't remember telling her that and none of that information is public. My wife and I both have private accounts on social media, so I don't know how she got that information. Everyone I know who's been tagged is trying to report the account and get it deleted, but we know that once it's deleted she'll just create another one. Honestly, I don't want to go to the police because it's too much hassle and my wife and I are both busy right now, but if this continues we won't have a choice but to do so, so I really don't know what to do now. This is really frustrating and annoying. I just want my dad to take her back, so we don't have to deal with this nonsense. So far, this is really annoying, and I hope this situation continues because I don't want this update to have any impact on real life. It's now been 2 weeks and my wife and I are still dealing with the fallout from rejecting my mother. She started escalating things to the next level. She started showing up at my shop and giving me the silent treatment. Usually she'll show up around noon and stay for an hour and a half or so. She'll just glare at me angrily from across the shop, but I don't care. I try to ignore her completely because it's the best way to deal with her. I ignored her for a week, and yesterday I guess she finally realized that it's useless to intimidate me like that. She did the complete opposite again, which made her gain my favor again. I was a little relieved when she didn't show up at the store yesterday, because I thought she finally left me alone. When I left the store after work, she was standing next to my car. She didn't look angry, just a little frustrated, and I felt a little sorry for her because she looked much worse than when she first arrived. I don't even know where she lives now, and as far as I know, she broke off contact with most of her friends here when she left. If she wants to save money, hotels are probably too expensive for her, but I didn't ask her because it's none of my business anyway. I got close to the car, tried to ignore her and get in, but she kept getting in my way until the last moment, and kept saying she wanted to talk to me. Finally, after 5 minutes of putting up with this, I asked her what the hell was going on and what she wanted to talk to me about now, after all the ridiculous things she had done. She started crying, and I wasn't speaking calmly or quietly, but in a completely out-of-control cry. When I asked her, she was really crying so hard that she couldn't even speak. At that moment, I started to get a little worried. I don't like my parents, I really don't like my mother, but I'm still a human being and I knew she was in pain. There was no other explanation for her behavior, so I tried to calm her down and asked her to sit in my car with me so she could calm down and we could talk. If it wasn't for her little outburst, I probably wouldn't have asked her to sit in my car and talk to me. I think it was necessary because after the last update, a lot of people have given me very unpopular names just because I'm human. So I just want to clarify that the reason I haven't contacted the police or a lawyer is purely out of humanity, and also because of some practical reasons which would require a lot of effort and money. Not everyone has the time and money for that, so I haven't taken any action. It took a while for her to calm down after she got in the car, but eventually she started to tell me that ever since they moved to California, my father's behavior had become very strange, and when she found out about the affair, she broke down. She came back just to come back, because she couldn't stand being in the same place as him anymore, because it reminded her of how much he had hurt her. She was relying on me to help her because, to be honest, she didn't even have any money, and she had to borrow from a few of her friends in California to be able to come here. A few years ago, she quit her job and started traveling with my father. Later, when they were in California, she never worked again. Without a job, she has been a housewife living off my father's money. But now that their marriage is over, she has no one to rely on. She hasn't bothered to keep in touch with any friends here, and her family doesn't care about her, so I'm the only one she can turn to. She sounds very desperate, but after listening to her, I'm more disappointed. I told her that the most I could do for her was give her some money for her expenses, and that was it. In any case, I would never agree to let her stay at my place. I don't trust her enough, and after all the trouble she's caused me, she has no reason to expect me to. When I said that, she really lost it with me, saying that she didn't even want my help anymore. Then she got out of the car, slammed the door with more force than was necessary to ensure I knew she was upset, and walked away. When I went to work today, she didn't show up once, and I'm starting to think she finally got the message and will stay away from us now. Or at least I hope so, because I'm really exhausted and don't want to deal with this anymore. Update 3. My mother hasn't contacted me for a month, and I think she's finally gone. I don't know exactly where she is, but at least I know how she got all my information. I had an old account on Facebook, but I hadn't used it for the past few years because I forgot the password. Then I changed to a new account because there was no way to retrieve the old one, and since the email associated with the old account, which I no longer use, I created a new account with this new account, but unfortunately the last account was a public account, and I think most of my mother's information came from there. I posted photos of friends on that account, tagged with their names, and that's where she got those accounts from, as well as many photos of me in front of my apartment. I didn't bother to censor anything, so I guess she just figured out where I live. I didn't take any action because it would have been pointless, as she already knows certain things about me, and I'm pretty sure she won't try to contact me again. She already tried and realized it was pointless, so she won't waste any more time. I don't know what she's doing now, because I haven't spoken to her for a while, and I really hope she stays that way. I don't want her to contact me at all. I hope she's doing well. Of course, I'm still alone. Most importantly, I put aside my personal resentment towards her and don't wish her any misfortune, but I don't want her to appear around me. A few weeks ago, some of her friends contacted me and told me that after I rejected her, she had sought their help, but they also did not respond to her because they had no reason to do so, because she had ignored them for many years, and it was they who had tried to talk to her and keep in touch, so now when she needed them, they did not need to step forward as her friends. They told me that she had been staying at a motel outside the city for the past few weeks, and that she was there because she had mentioned it in a message, but now she had blocked all messages, so they thought she had gone and no longer needed their help. Let's see what happens now, because I know for sure that when the divorce proceedings actually begin, she will definitely try to contact again. Update 4. Here's the big news. It's been almost a year since I last spoke to my mother, and it's actually surprised me that after all these months, she hasn't tried to talk to us, because it seems to me that she is going through the divorce proceedings, and as she said, she doesn't have any money, and I really don't understand how she can pay for a lawyer. But recently I heard from a few family members that apparently she and my father have gotten back together, which shocked me because my mother has always talked about how my father betrayed her last time, and now they're suddenly together again, which makes no sense to me. I learned about this when I met some relatives at a cousin's wedding. My parents, as usual, did not attend the wedding, but I really wanted to know how they had reconciled, so I decided to talk to some aunts, even though I was not close to them. I was keen to learn more gossip, and they were very good at that, so they told me the whole story. Apparently, a few weeks after my mother had gone back to my father, she gave him an ultimatum. Either he filed for divorce, as he had not yet done so, or she would do it herself and she would not let him off the hook. The most interesting thing was that she was not at all interested in him, and in fact she was sleeping with many other men, and my father just happened to be one of those idiots who fell in love with her. Once she clarified this to him, he ended the relationship. Long story short, this is why my parents eventually got back together. I'm happy for them because they are a good match for each other. If they had split up and each gone with someone else, they could have caused each other lifelong trauma. No one should have to go through something like that, so it's better that they're still together. My wife and I laughed about it a lot, and I think they turned out okay in the end. They became the family joke, which is exactly what I wanted.